So, um, anyway, oh my goodness, it's been a busy while. Man, I've been trying to study and get ahead for senior high camp when I'm doing that week, and I won't be able to study. And then I was studying for a funeral yesterday and a wedding yesterday, and oh man, I was so tired. I was absolutely, it's been so draining. So either today, either it's going to be really good and I'm just kind of break into delirium and it's going to be funny, or it's just going to be very glum and I'm just going to drag and sleep my way through. I don't know which way it's going to go. I'm like teetering on that point of how much coffee can you drink. But anyway, I had one funny thing. Claire told a couple of people, but hopefully Bob is listening. Are we broadcasting this outside today? But anyway, if Bob is listening, Bob next door has this dog named Bonehead. Yeah, some of you people maybe heard this story, but yeah, so Claire was telling me she went to the park and Simeon knows the dog. He's like, a dog, that's we see him around, that's Bonehead, and Claire was at the park and she said there was this bald guy who was walking past him with a dog. And Simeon starts pointing, he says, look, a bonehead, Mom, look at the bonehead. And Claire said, she was like, no, that's Bob's dog that's a bonehead. And but anyway, she said that was kind of embarrassing, him calling this guy out as a bonehead. But anyway, I thought that was pretty funny. Oh, but anyway, so we're continuing looking at this Sermon on the Mount, and today we're looking at salt and light, and being salt and light. And this world would be pretty bland without salt or light. There'd be a lot of running into doors. There would be a lot of bland food. There would be serious problems without salt and light. Maybe snails can get by with salt and light. I was thinking, I don't know if, hopefully none of you have ever salted a snail, but I'm not proud of it. I feel bad. It's a terrible thing. They melt into a puddle. But anyway, and they don't run that fast either. They may be able to get by without salt and light, but the rest of the world needs salt and light. There's a problem if you don't have that. So here we're looking, and Jesus has just finished this portion of the Sermon on the Mount that's about the attitude that a Christian is. Jesus has said that the poor in spirit will receive the kingdom of heaven. He says those who mourn will be comforted. He says the meek will inherit the earth. He says those who hunger and thirst for righteousness' sake will be satisfied. He says that the merciful will receive mercy. He says that the poor in spirit will see God. He says that the peacemakers will be called the sons of God. He says that those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake will inherit the kingdom of heaven. And all of these attitudes I've told you, I believe, are what a Christian looks like. Like, if you want to know what a Christian looks like, this is the attitude of a Christian. And, does that seem like a fair diagnostic of this? Because when he says, these people will be called my sons, these people will be able to see God. When he says, these people will inherit the kingdom of heaven, in my mind, these people, this is the Christians. So why would you, if you were to ask yourself, what is Jesus getting at? What is his point? Should we say, and your point is? There's a point to this. Like, we're supposed to be like, what are these attitudes? Because I'd better make sure this is me. Like, I'd better make sure that is what I look like. I better pay attention and look around and make sure that I'm applying these things. So this portion that Jesus is moving into now is the portion that is, you need to be this. You need to be that. And there's a great purpose for you. And Jesus is now kind of rolling into the application where you had better be this person and you better apply these things. So I've had one question. This is maybe in any theology questions or any type of deep questions. If I was going to ask God a question, or if I was God, I'm not. But if I was putting things together, this is something that I've always thought, man, God did this so different than I would have thought that he would have done this. He did it very, very different. Now, and my thought would be, God, why didn't you come down to this earth and set yourself up this big, grand, glorious gold throne in the middle of the earth and let people come to you and see you face to face and choose whether or not they'll serve you? You know, why didn't you do it that way, God? Why? Why must we have blind faith, God? Why did you choose to do it this way? Because that is not the way my mind says I would have done it. I would think that is one of my greatest questions for God. But God had a great plan, and his plan was a lot more elaborate and a lot greater than my plan. The Bible says that angels longed to peer and to see into the plan of what God was doing and what his great layout was going to happen throughout a time. That these angels were looking and they're like, man, God has this huge plan. And he's going to do something where he is going to create like someone in his image. And then he's going to create this love relationship with them. And he's going to do something with like this humanity thing. And we want to see, what is this huge, elaborate plan? We want to know, what is Jesus going to do? What is God going to do with mankind? And his plan was a little more elaborate than mine would have been. And so as we look at this, you know, God has a plan. And I want to look in 2 Corinthians 5:17. It says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ Jesus, he is a new creation. The old things have passed away, and behold, all things have become new. And it says, and all this is from God, who through Christ is reconciling us to himself. And he's given us the job of reconciliation. So God has this great plan of salvation. But can you believe that he's turning over the job of reconciliation to us? Like Jesus Christ is doing it, and he's doing it for God and through God and with God, but he has told us to be the ones who are the people who are carrying the message of reconciliation. He describes it a little further in verse 19. He says, meaning Christ is that God is bringing the world to himself through Christ, but he has given us the job of the message of salvation. Can you imagine that God entrusted like the part of knowing him to us, to his people? Can you believe that that's the way that he did it, that he chose his creation to carry the message to one another? What an incredible and huge job. You know, sometimes I give my kids, you know, and we may think, man, that is a huge job for me. That's super intimidating. Like if it's seriously my job to carry the message to people, and if like all of his grand plan is going to depend on me, like maybe it's just me, but this blows my mind. Like this is like for me, this is insane. And sometimes I ask my kids to do jobs that are hard, you know, and a lot of times about 8, 9 o'clock at night, sometimes even later, I'm like, guys, did anybody lock up the chickens? And I'm like, guys, I told you to lock up the chickens. Go lock up the chickens. And, like it's dark. Dad, can't you just lock up the chickens today? Won't you do it, you know? And I'm like, guys, I told you to lock up the chickens. Just go lock up the chickens. But it's dark out, you know, I can't. I'm like, okay, I will lock up the chickens this time, but you guys need to do it next time. And sometimes we're given a job, even harder than that. Sometimes we're given a job, though, and we think, that's just not for me. Like, the elements just don't match, and I just can't believe I'm not cut out, and there's somebody a lot more suited to do that job than I am. Like, there's somebody bigger and stronger, somebody more equipped, somebody not afraid of the dark. Like, there's somebody else who should do that job. Can you believe that God has handed the job of letting the world know him to you guys? To you? Does the weight of that responsibility hit home? Like, this is extreme, right? In my mind. And Paul continues here in verse 20. He says, therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ, and God is making his appeal to man through us. Can you believe it? God, who set up the grand plan, who sent the part of Jesus Christ, the part of God, of the Trinity, to earth to die on the cross, who did the greatest part, literally entrusted us to carry the message of salvation. Like, that's our part in the greatest plan of all that ever was. And he sent us. He gave us the responsibility of making sure the message was carried. And can you believe that I just can't believe the weight of something that he would trust to us, that we would think, no. I don't really see myself as that person or even doing that. And so as we get to where Jesus is here in Matthew 5, where he's told us, now listen, here's the attitudes of a Christian, okay? This is what they look like. This is what they are. Now listen to what he says here. He says in verse 13, he says, you are the salt of the earth. He says, you guys are the ones who've been sprinkled upon this earth to bring the life out of it. You are the ones to make the change, like you people are the ones to make the change on this earth. And he says, but if salt has lost its taste, he says, how will its saltiness be restored? He says, you know what? It's no longer good for anything but to be thrown on the ground and trampled under people's feet. Do you realize what he's saying? He's saying that, if you say, I kind of like to be cool. I kind of like to be liked. I kind of like people to think well of me. I kind of don't see myself as the ambassador carrying the message of salvation so that we are the ones who actually bring the people and tell them what Jesus Christ has done. Like, I'm just like, man, I'm super uncomfortable with that. Like, it's not me. So you're the salt and you have no taste. You're not bringing out the flavor of what you're supposed to do. And this is, I hate to really throw this sidetrack off right now on you, but I can't tell you how many times I get chewed out for not putting the seasoning on the steaks at home or on anything I'm cooking. I mean, it's all the time. And this is not mostly my problem. But just last week, I took the seasoning out, I put them on the pork chops or whatever, I flipped it over, seasoned the other side, I put it back, and I did it for once. And then I hear this squeal in the house she found the seasoning still in there. She's like, Nate, you didn't put the seasoning on! And I'm like, no, I did. This time I did. I just put it away. Two things you'd never guess. I got it, I used it, I put it in the cupboard where I got it. You didn't see that coming, did you? But he says, you guys, you're the salt. And if it doesn't have any flavor, you may as well throw it on the ground and trample it. That's us. If we're not willing to be what we are, if we say, I'm salt, I'm a Christian, I just don't like seasoning the world. That's all. That's all. If you're the one who's may as well be trampled under people's feet, do you realize what a worthless place that puts you in? In Matthew's account? I believe it's in Luke's account, and I looked this up just to make sure. I'm pretty sure. It's not Mark, but in Luke's account, Luke says this. Luke says, if salt has lost its taste, it's no longer any good for the dung pile, and it's no good for the ground. So the only place you can put it is on the path and trample it. So just envision this, okay? If this is us, and we're not going to be the season to direct the world to Jesus Christ, and we're not even good enough for the dung pile, that's really, really bad. That's you're not even, you're essentially, wherever we dump you is got to be a place where it's got to be a dump, because you're even going to ruin the fertilizer and you're going to wreck the grass. That's how unuseful someone is who's not that. Who's not an ambassador for Christ. If you weren't a Christian, then you're not salt, so that's not a big deal. But when you become a Christian and you become salt, you got a purpose. And you got a job. And when I say you got a job, the weight of the job that you got is extreme. You got the job of all jobs. God is making his appeal to man through you. Can you imagine? Are you doing that? Is that you? So here he continues and he says in verse 14, you are the light of the world. Can you imagine? You're the light of the world. It's as if the world is walking on crested cliff edges. And if you're not there, if you're not the light, they could fall to their doom. It's you. It's not I know that the Holy Spirit works in the calling of man, but there's this whole other side that it's you. You're the light. You're the one that God has chosen to make his appeal to man through you. And if they don't see that light, They're going to walk right off that edge. You know, isn't that extreme? Like he's like laying this out, and he says, you're the light on the world, and he says, the city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Like if you're the light, there's no hiding you. Like it's not supposed to be like oh, I'm just a Christian who doesn't season the world. It's like you can't be it. Like he says, literally, you're a Christian without the attitudes of the Beatitudes. You're a Christian who doesn't have those things. He says, you know, I don't know where he's definitely going with this, but if you're not fit for the dung pile, I got a feeling that it's just like you're just so not really it at all. Like you can't hide this light. Like if you're the light, you're the light. If you're meant to have a job and he's making his appeal through you, then you're seriously supposed to do this job. It is something that you're supposed to do. And I think that, you know, many of us will say, well, the biggest problem, what is the biggest problem? We don't like being picked on. We don't like sliding down the ladder of our work, of our job, where we work. We don't like being reduced in the sight of all of our friends. We like to be somebody, and we know that when we become the light of the world and we make God's appeal through our voice, people are going to pick on us. They're going to laugh at us, they're going to mock us, and they are not going to see us. If they don't agree with us, they're not going to see us in a friendship light the same as they did before, are they? But how did Jesus end the Beatitudes? What did he say? He said, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. He says, blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for great is your reward in heaven. He says, so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. He says, listen, guys, every prophet, my followers before, they all took the persecution. They all took the ridicule. They were a light, and they took it. And if you guys aren't going to be it, these are the people who are going to receive the kingdom of heaven. If you're a light, right? If you're lit up, you're lit up. If you're gonna complain and say, well, I don't really want to take the guff for this, that's our biggest stress, right? We don't want to hear the replies. We don't want to hear what they say. We don't want the rejection. We hate rejection. Don't we hate rejection? We do. We hate rejection. But listen, if you're the light, you're the light. If you're the one God's making the appeal through, you're the one God's making the appeal through. And if you're not willing to stand like the prophets stood and be mocked and laughed at, if you're not willing to say, listen, Jesus Christ came to earth through the womb of a woman and was born in the likeness of a man and died on the cross to pay for the sin of the world. And then you say, and he loves you and he died for you to save your sin. If you can't stand there and take it, if you cannot be the light, then what are you? Like you can't stand with the prophets. You can't be what you are. What you are. Like if you can't be the salt and you can't be the light and you can't be what you are, you've really, man, can you believe the job that you were given that you're not doing? And, you know, I've got this one kid in soccer. Man alive. He is just, oh, he kills me. Like this kid, he goes and he stands by the goal and he's like, pass to me, pass to me. And then he just like, the ball will come maybe within like 30, 40 feet of him, and they'll be fighting for it, and I'll be like, get it in play, get it in play. And he's like, pass it over to me, and I'm like, listen, if you're going to leave him hang out to dry, and if they're going to let it turn over the ball, and you're not going to get involved, you don't deserve to kick the goal if it comes to you. Like, get in there and be what you're supposed to be, or get over on defense, or be goalie, or something. Like, he drives me nuts. You know, he kills me. Just the laziness is just, I mean, oh, if he was my kid, like, I'd just straight bench him, you know? I can't do that to their kids. But I mean, Jesus is like, you're the light. You are the salt. A city that is set on a hill can't be hidden. And he says here, he says that nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but they put it on a pole and it gives light to the entire house. He says it lights up the whole room. He says it has a purpose. You have a purpose, and it is not to be hidden. You cannot find shame in who you are and what you are supposed to be. This is the attitude, and you are the salt, and you are the light. You are the one who God is calling the earth to himself through you. You're the one. You have this responsibility on your shoulders, like it or not. And, here in closing today, you know, maybe you wonder, or maybe you somehow think that you have like another job. Maybe you think like, oh, like the pastor can do that, the minister can do that. He can tell people, like he can be the light and I can be cool, the guy over here who's like, what would you think your purpose is? Maybe it's just to be nice to people, right? Well, my purpose is to be, and that's the start, because if you're not a kind and nice person, you may as well tell people, because, man, you're not living it yourself. So that's a good start. But let's say you're just a nice person and you're not the one that God is making his appeal. When he says he's making his appeal through us, that means that we literally are showing them the way to salvation. That's like, you do the whole thing. You show them to God. You tell them. You finish it. And, if you think, maybe I'm a nice person, I heard someone say this once. They said, if there's a blind person heading towards a cliff, and you go and you be really nice to them, maybe you kind of wrap their scarf around their neck, kind of bundle them up a little bit, pat them on the back, and you leave. What did you do? What did you accomplish? You made them feel they're on the same road as you are, didn't you? You gave them the good feeling that you're both heading the same direction, didn't you? And what are they going to do? They're going to walk right off the cliff. Because you were only kind, but you weren't a light. God couldn't make his appeal through you. You have to be willing to stand where the prophets stood and take the persecution they took for being a witness, the salt and light of the world. You have to. It's not maybe. You really have to. And if you were to ask yourself, how am I doing? I would say you'd ask your coworkers that. Ask your best friends that. Your neighbors that. You say, was I the light? Did you see the way? Or was I like a faint glow that you didn't really see the way? Like, was I or wasn't I? And just in the last thing I'm going to say is Matthew 10:32. Jesus says, if you are ashamed of me before men, I will be ashamed of you before my Father who is in heaven. But if you confess me before men, I will confess you before my Father who is in heaven. And he says, you know what? You got to be a light. There's no option here, guys. You need to be the light that shows the path to Jesus Christ, because God is making his appeal for the greatest thing that ever happened through us. And it's just amazing that he would do that. So we'll have our closing song.